Just fucking do it. Subscribe now.
All right. So far we talked about the fact that we play the banks against each other. Right?
Yeah, and then the other thing that's not in this is, so it talks about the two banks as if it's like a binary choice, but there are other banks. So we go and we do a bit of a beauty pageant, confidentially, but we go around and campaign. But now that we confirmed that it is during this recession, though, that makes the state banks and the smaller banks seem a little maybe less attractive to do business with because their stability might be in question, right?
Although there's one other thing too, and that is that for the first quarter of 91, if we annualize the net, the trend all of a sudden starts going down. Now, I don't know whether the sales of lumber is somehow cyclical, right?
Yeah, so 55% is between April and September of their numbers.
Oh, that's what they said?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Then that would explain
also know that this loan is not based on cash flow. Huh? There's not enough cash flow.
It's based on the assets.
It's based on the assets. So.
But if you look at the current assets, it's in 1991 it's 932, and if you look at the current liabilities, it's 690. So there's only a difference of 242 net working capital he has.
Say again.
So the net working capital is 242. Including the notes payable of the bank of 246.
So that ratio is what, 2 to 1?
No, it's 1.3 to 1. So it's there's not such a big margin, you know. The margin's quite tiny. But I mean, his best option is to just shop with banks and see what deal you can have.
Going to maybe a cash flow lender might be better.
No, that's 100% not, because there's not enough cash flow to stay. If you look at his cash flow, so it was less than 100 million in EBITDA, I think. Let's see. So the net income before taxes, and then we add back the interest expense. It's only 86.
But it's rising impressively, right?
Yeah, but from nothing to rise a little bit, it's impressive. But it's still only 83. So, even with the 460 that he got offered, that is a leverage already of 7.
And plus the bank have like a lot of leverage, because if he continues to grow and banks won't give him an extra straight loan or a line of credit, he can grow himself into bankruptcy. Because, it's worth he needs to pay upfront.
Yeah.
So the banks have a lot of leverage in this deal.
So it must be an asset-based financing. And luckily he does have, although his margins are very thin, he does have a lot of assets. So if you look at, for instance, the accounts receivable and the inventory, actually his inventory is eating up his working capital. You see,
that can be managed better.
It's going up way too much. That can be a warning signal, because why is his inventory going up so much? Because he's not selling enough.
Well, he's not managing it good enough, right? Because that's the trap. Like you can manufacture, but if you're not turning over fast enough, then you're actually tying up your money in something illiquid for no reason.
Yeah, but it can be a
must do it more just in
red
time
flag as well. Like, his profits have not gone up that much, but his inventory has gone up more than 2 times.
And the inventory isn't being manufactured, we don't think. The inventory is being purchased. So is he purchasing too much inventory?
Well, it could be a combination of both, right? Because they talk about how they do moldings and things like that.
Yeah, they sell moldings. I don't know. But we don't know if they manufacture.
But the inventory isn't counted as cost of goods sold until it's actually sold. So it doesn't come off the operating profit. Like it's accrual accounting, right? So otherwise it's just sitting in the warehouse and it's an asset of some value.
Exactly,
and then
that's
when you
what
sell
I'm saying.
something,
So if you're gonna go,
so
we just discovered that probably cash flow financing here, it's not gonna work because the leverage is gonna be too high. So you're gonna try to do asset-based financing, which you already got some offer, I think from Dodge, right?
Right.
And then if you look at the inventory and accounts receivable, you're gonna think, okay, how much of a percentage will I be able to get? So let's say on the accounts receivable, if his customers are very good paying customers and he has low, attrition.
Or
Yes.
turnover or whatever.
Yeah, maybe he can get 80, 90% even. But if they're looking into it and they say, hey, you have a lot of customers who are actually over 30, 60, 90 days, he's going to get a lower percentage. And it's going to be the same with the inventory. And that will be lower. Generally, banks will
50%.
give less. And depending on how good the inventory is, so if some of the inventory they deem, not sellable in the foreseeable future, they're going to discount that. So I think these are the two numbers we need to look at. And maybe you can do something on the property as well. So it will be very difficult for him to do something that's unsecured, in my opinion. He could try to not do any security from his personal assets, which he has, like his house and the house of his wife. I think he can try to keep that away, but I think with this numbers, it's going to be hard to not give any pledges on.
But even with asset lending, the debt service has got to be covered. Where's it going to be covered from? Whether it's cash flow lending or not, the debt service, the debt's applied against the assets. I mean, does he have the cash flow anyway to cover any kind of debt service?
With these rates, it's going to be difficult. I mean, it's 11%. And that's already the best rate. It's already.
And back in the early 90s, it actually went up to 15%.
I mean, it says that it's already a rate offered to the best brackets of clients, so probably very hard to.
Yes, 2%.
Prime plus 2 is pretty good. But what about a hybrid solution? Right, some factoring, assuming it's not already being done. Also, these trade associations, like the Lumber Association of America or something like that, there might be some incentives there. The state government, sometimes in times of recession and that, there are special programs to keep key industries.
During that time frame, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund had special Save Lumber. It wasn't called that, but something like Save Lumber, and they made loans that were disproportionate to reality. And and lumber is cyclical, and the use of lumber is based on housing starts and a bunch of things like that. And so, but the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank came up with money, but hardly anybody called them. It's like when Marcus Bauer finally, the 81st phone call, he called the World Bank to save his fucking sawmill, and he couldn't believe it. One thing, 81 calls to the same two operators. He knew the operators. I mean, he could sleep with them. He knew them so well, okay? And then find, oh, you mean that? Because unless you frame. That's why the templates are so important. Unless you frame the comments you're making exactly so they understand. So it's in their template of how to answer. But they didn't use the World Bank or International Monetary Fund, but there were money available at that time.
So the conclusion is that he is. It's best for him to shop at different banks for a straight loan or a line of credit. And if that doesn't happen, then he also can negotiate with some suppliers for factoring and also negotiate with his creditors to pay off the accounts payable. So he can maximize his net working capital and then he can make the growth and then he can continue to, then he has more revenue, perhaps more profit. And then he can go to the next step. But if I were him, I would just turnkey because he's working like 100 hours a week and he only makes, his net income is very low. I don't know what his salary is, but
his salary is actually quite good.
That goes back to the point.
For that time.
But that goes back to the point this morning of even though you can't afford a regional manager, you can't afford not to have one. So he needs one. He needs someone to at least take some of the burden off. I think it's a huge risk that his personal assistant can do everything he can do because if anything happens to her, then he's doing even more than 100 hours, right? Like everything seems dependent on, that's another warning sign, right? Everything's dependent on this one individual. There don't seem to be systems in place so that he can walk away or if
what didn't come up this morning in the presentation is that he's his first manager. Him. And in the beginning it's slower because you got to be there, one, to learn the business a little, not a lot, a little, and to see what's really required and what's not required, what employees, when they come to work, when they don't come to work, what kind of breaks they take. But you're going back to Andreas, he was the manager for the first till they got to about 6 acquisitions. And then the first person that he thought we picked didn't work out. And then it was his 7th acquisition where he got somebody that was worth a darn, and that he made that person temporary regional manager. The other board members were afraid to make it a permanent because then he's got a job title, and then we fire him, we got to pay him more money, yada yada. And he wound up being the first regional manager after 7 acquisitions. Now you made a bunch of acquisitions. Some of the people aren't worth a shit, and maybe 1 or 2 are.
No, but it's true. And then you have regional managers and probably Andreas as integration managers as well after he does an acquisition. So then you move up the ladder, and then you buy more time, and then you can focus more on acquisitions, and then it accelerates.
Yeah.
Because, Andreas, the acquisition he did yesterday, he probably is an integration manager who's like sitting on the company for the next month to integrate everything. And then, he can feed her the next acquisition. And then you move it up.
There is enough cash to cover debt service still, even with the 10.5. So I believe it's 1.7. So
Okay.
it's still doable.
And then what he could do is also what we were saying about the inventory management. Like he maybe stops acquiring, thins it out a bit.
Yeah.
That would help things a little as well.
And if necessary in the future, he can lower his salary a little bit because I think he gets quite a good salary for that time.
Mm-hmm. But the thing about that he's doing too much and that he needs a manager and things like that ties into the banks. Like it's related to this situation because banks won't necessarily feel as comfortable lending to a business where one person is so important, right? Because there's risk there. Because if anything happens, car accident, then the business pretty much falls apart. Like there's no redundancy or depth.
Yep.
So that's something to consider as well.
Okay, shall we bring some notes in?
Yeah. How do we want to structure this? So do we put up the numbers, like a summary of the numbers?
Yeah, we can start with the numbers, and then we can give a very brief history background of the guy who owns the company, perhaps SWOT analysis, and then the question he has, he wants to get some money, and then how we can structure it, and where do we get the money, different banks.
Where is this guy located? I forgot.
Pacific Northwest. Like outside of Seattle, probably. It doesn't say, but...
Okay. I'm pretty sure that we were also in a recession.
Yeah. 91.
Yeah.
Gulf War I as well.
Yeah. The QLA was going like gangbusters. And that's when I was doing QLA, before I started the course in '93. But I was going like gangbusters.
It would be good to see for this, but it's kind of not in there is a statement of cash flows, just to see how strong the operating revenues are, like the cash flow from operating activities and how much he's paying out in finance, to see the proportions. But if some butts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas, right?
Yeah, we've got enough information, and then
I think so. Yeah, the loan dilemma. So numbers, loan dilemma, or actually a bit of a background here, industry situation, loan dilemma, and then the options that we brainstormed.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'll set the numbers up. Obviously, an abbreviated version of this.
Look at that last paragraph. There it says the tentative discussion, blah blah, and there are several things that still needs to be discussed. I think that is also something that we need to discuss. Thinking what he probably will be able to get. I understand, of course, he needs to do shop around, but it seems that with his current bank, there's also already a max, and this bank is willing. So it's you can shop around, but mostly it's not as if there's going to be a major difference between what the banks will offer. So I think we also need to.
So that's before we set up the bidding war, right? So
yes, but that's going to be all assumptions, right?
Yeah.
If a positive assumption, we're going to be saying that they'll be able to give us everything we want, 100% on the.
No, that's
right,
that's
or maybe
it,
even above. But I think we need to.
It's good to know that worst case scenario, at least, it sounds like the 90-day revolving note at no more than 464. That's the worst outcome, right? That sounds like it's all but certain that it would be offered. The
Yes,
last
but
line
don't
in the,
forget. Yes,
from
but
the
don't
new bank,
forget
from the
that,
new
that a
bank.
lot of details have not been. Look at all the restrictions that they want to put on.
Mhm.
So the guy is already saying there's restrictions on additional borrowing.
Yeah, that's standard.
Net working capital needs to be maintained at a certain level.
That's standard.
There will be limitations on withdrawal of the funds, etc., etc. So
Yeah,
I
those
think
are
the only
standard.
thing that seems quite certain is the interest rate and the max.